Your book is right here. Okay, so I need to like.
Good, good,
Oh,
yes.
okay.
And I've got
Oh my god. Oh shit. Shit. Um. Okay. So anyway, hey everyone. First of all, like if you're checking out this podcast right now, you should definitely get this particular book. This is like authored by Nick. He is like the leading voice of the data science community. He is like the top three people in the data science domain in general. Okay, let's like start with why don't we give the audience a little bit of your background and how you started your journey in data scientist and as a data scientist, as well as like you build a career of it and you're like
yeah,
basically how you know give us a TLDR on like
yeah. So it started in undergrad. I interned as a data scientist. I interned as a data engineer at Google. Started my career out at Facebook on their growth team, where we used a lot of data and A/B testing to understand how do we prevent new user churn. So I've been basically looking at data and using data in multiple different roles in multiple different companies. And even before these things were called data science, I was always interested in math and coding. There was a site called Project Euler, which if you're a hardcore nerd, you got to check it out. It's a bunch of math problems that you solve using code. So you have to be good at math, but also you can't solve it with pen and pencil. It's all about coding your solution. Those kind of things always attracted me. Like were really interesting to me. So that's kind of how my career's been. But in the last few years, I've been just mostly focused around developing and nurturing data science talent and helping them get jobs, helping them interview. I did that with the book Ace the Data Science Interview. And I also did that with my website called datalemur.com, which has more than 150,000 people on it using it to kind of up their SQL and database and Python skills, because these are some of the, core technologies that are needed by data and ML teams these days.
totally. Okay, so I think one of the things, since like a lot of our audience are in the venture capital community,
Yeah.
and I would ask, like, I feel like I would argue data science is becoming more important on a day-to-day basis due to like the revolution of AI. So can you give us a little bit example of like, because of like right now we're hearing AI in a day-to-day conversation, how will data science like what role does data science play in a top AI startup?
Yeah, sure. So, a lot of these terms are really buzzwords. Whether you call the person a data scientist, an ML engineer, or, often sometimes even a data engineer at a small enough firm, people are holding multiple of these roles and multiple of these titles. And at the end of the day, you'll see, with this whole big Gen AI hype, a lot of the value is actually unlocked through training these big models, but on good, clean data, or it doesn't have to be clean, actually, just it's really about what data are you feeding into it. And that's the part that kind of hasn't gotten as much attention. It's like, hey, we've got these really powerful models now, but part of what the big unlock was that we've got these huge training sets. And that's why I think, what is it? Was it Google or OpenAI that's paying Reddit $60 million a year to license their data? I think it's Google. They're trying to license the data from Reddit for $60 million a year because that's the foundational kind of like question and answer data, and like they've
Mhm.
got all this text. So what role does data scientists have in this whole Gen AI revolution? I mean, basically data scientists are helping clean the data, acquire data, manage the data, and build models. Now, whether you want to call those data scientists ML engineers or ML architects or like research engineers, basically the skills basically come down to the same stuff to the same skills that data scientists already have, which is managing data, cleaning the data up, making it useful, and then building models on top of it. So yeah, I mean, this whole Gen AI thing is very synonymous with what data scientists have already been doing for a while. It's just that we have more compute and we have more training data to feed into these models, which is why we have these much better performance.
Totally. Okay. So, okay, I'm gonna just like put on my venture hat for now.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, let's say, like, okay, if I have an AI startup, like if I just invest in an AI startup and they're hiring like a lot of data scientists, what would be the best way to get the top quality talent? And you mentioned about like cleaning data, acquiring data, like
Yeah.
managing data and building model. So like I guess like is there like a full stack data scientist? I mean, I feel like I'm not technical, so it kind of exposed myself, but I wonder like can you translate to like a regular person who's like a non-technical person? Like as a non-technical VC, like how are you going to help the startup to kind of like attract like the top data science talent?
So you're saying how would I help a company?
Yeah, so
Or
I guess like what would be like the best way to getting the top talent to
talent?
join your team?
Yeah. So of course, first is pay. That's an easy one. Second is of course equity. I think when it comes to so of course, besides pay and equity, the other things what we can do is emphasize that we're on a kind of a modern stack. I think a lot of folks they want to be part of this Gen AI revolution, and they're stuck at traditional companies that are using old tools or old frameworks. For example, a really popular language in the data community is called R. And it's beloved by statisticians and everything. And 10, 15 years ago, it had like an equal footing with Python. But now the more and more we go into like Gen AI stuff, the less R becomes relevant and the more Python becomes relevant because most of the stuff is using libraries that are built off of Python. So the point being is you are able to attract some of these people who are very smart, who are very well trained with dealing with data, but they're stuck using these older tools in Fortune 500s. You can kind of attract them to your startup by saying, hey, you know, you have a chance to learn all these new, more modern tools. This is good for your career and it's also good for us. And, clearly at the Fortune 500, you're not going to get to practice any of these skills. Come over to my startup. We'll give you a leeway. We'll give you a week or two to go learn it. And then after 2 weeks, you better perform. So that is pretty of an interesting kind of pitch for a high performer who might have been stuck with some of these more legacy tools or frameworks. The other big pitch is moving fast. Again, AI, there are ethical considerations with AI and machine learning, but this is a hot take, Grace. This is a hot take.
Mhm.
There might be too much of a focus on those aspects. And again, people might, maybe 10 years from now, I'll get in trouble for what I'm saying. But basically, there are a lot of places where there's like an equal amount of people trying to make it safe and then an equal amount of people trying to get performance out of the thing. But if you can't get performance out of these tools, you don't need half the people doing safety work. Like you need maybe 10% or 5%. And there's this big cult in Silicon Valley about AI doom and AI safety. And I do think it's largely been overhyped. And I'm not the only one to say this. There's Jan LeCun, who heads Facebook's AI research lab. I think they're rebranded as like Meta Research Lab now. But basically, the top AI person at Facebook is on this side. And then, but there's some people at OpenAI who are kind of really scared about this stuff. And there's some other doomers. We call them doomers. And basically, in a lot of these Fortune 500s, I think that there's just a huge focus on safety and kind of negative reputational risk. And it might be too much and nothing got shipped. And we're still in the early openings where it's like, yeah, you know what? ChatGPT might not get everything right. We don't need 500 people looking at safety. We need 10 people looking at safety and 990 to make sure this thing just works really well in general, right? But I think in a lot of places that focus on safety and algorithmic bias, it's like such a good talking point. Like, oh yeah, you don't want biased algorithms. Oh, you know what? You don't want biased self-driving car algorithms, but it's like we don't have self-driving cars that work really well yet. So the bias part is a small part of it. Like, let's just get the freaking car working first. And I think you have a chance as a startup to kind of emphasize, like, look, we're here to ship things. We might get things wrong, and we're not going to go super, put 1,000 eyes on it. Like, we're going to just ship fast. I don't know if you remember, Grace, a few months ago, there was that thing from Google where you'd ask it to like generate images of like the founding fathers and it would all be like African-American people. Or if
Mm.
it asked like, hey, who were like the earliest like pilgrims or who were the settlers of America? And it'd show this very diverse image of like African-Americans and Middle Easterns and Indian people and Latino people coming on the Mayflower, the ship from the England to the US. And it's like that. I don't think that's what it looked like. But that's because Google had this huge focus on like every picture should have a lot of diversity in it, regardless of whether that photo is asking you about the Mayflower or asking you about, what do the founding fathers of America look like. So this is like example of how like even in a company like Google, clearly they're focusing on safety and everything and cool, but the product itself isn't working and it's gotten like too safe where it's like it can't even answer basic things or create basic images, and you can see so obviously how it's failing. So if you're a small startup, you have you have an ability to poach some of this talent from these Fortune 500 companies or some of these more traditional companies like Google that might have too many roadblocks to production. And like, if you're a data scientist, you just want to ship stuff. So that's
I
the ground
I
model.
feel like those are some really compelling points, like shipping fast as well as like using like a more modern tool.
Yeah.
So I wonder, hi Mary, great seeing you. Okay, so we'll keep the question a little bit to the later stage. So like we'll address some like
Yeah,
bigger
for
picture
sure.
issues first. Okay, let's talk about like I wonder, okay, so as an investor, a lot of people are trying to invest in like the next big thing, right? So like when they're looking at I guess like a lot of people would be looking at, let's say, who is building the coolest like AI things at a big tech company and then poach them and like maybe like not poach them, but like technically just be like, hey, you if you're starting a company, let us know first. So I wonder like what would be the lens that you are using to be like, okay, if so and so is like, how do you like how do you like identify the best talent like a really at a really big company? Like how do you even figure out who does what like at a big company? Because a lot of the credit, like let's say if they're at OpenAI, they're building something. Like how do we know like who is legit within that organization? I'm sure everyone's legit, but I'm just talking about like the core
Yeah.
product building.
I haven't had to approach this problem, but I can understand why an investor would have to do it. Um, I'm not sure how much it really matters because if you're able to tell the compelling story, and this is a very cynical take on it, but if I'm outside of the company and you claim to have done a bunch of stuff, but you're able to story tell around it, it's hard for me to really know what you actually did. But if you tell a compelling enough story, you can get funded. I have this cynical take because I have literally heard people be like, yes, at company X, I led blah, blah, blah initiative. It's like, really? You did? I thought there were like 9 other people and they're like 30 reports and like you were just one person. But if they're able to kind of beat their chest loud enough and kind of confidently tell this vision of like, no, 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 I did this thing and raise money, and then it just gets mythologized, and then we just move on because they have a new company, and then we just move on, and like there's no one to correct the record. And I just haven't seen any like penalty for that kind of behavior. So this is a cynical take, which is like, does it really matter? So I've literally, I'm not going to call out anybody or any teams, but I've literally seen this happen multiple times where I've there's like this let's say there's a hyper growth startup we've all heard of here. Like I'm pretty sure, I was talking to a company that claims like, oh, we our two founders basically enabled the entire company to do machine learning, and without us and our inbuilt tool we built for the company, there wouldn't really be machine learning at company X. And I'm like, is that really true? You two people figured out machine learning for this company that now has 10,000 people. Without you guys, there would be no machine learning because you guys joined only, in year 6 of the company. So if you told me like you're the first employee there, like the first 10, or like, one of the first 5 engineers, I could believe it. But like when I hear people be like, you were an engineer like number like 1800, were you seriously that kind of person? I heard it, Grace. I literally heard this the other day on a podcast where the guy claimed that he did ML for Google Ads and he like brought machine learning to Google Ads, and he joined the company in like 2012. And like Google is a pioneer in machine learning. And why? Because matching the right people to the right ads on the right pages is a huge machine learning problem. And we're all sitting, and even the podcast host was like, dude, I was an intern at the same time. Are you for real? Like you were the guy who did machine learning at Google. You started in 2012. So how did they sell? Because Google already had like billions in ad revenue by like 2002, 2003, right? So people do that, but again, that founder went on to raise $100 million. So like, who cares? But as someone who knows stuff, I'm like, I don't, you hear people lie, but there's not really a penalty for that. But yeah, that's just my cynical takes on startups, founders, and VCs. So it doesn't really matter.
Okay. So basically you're saying like it's kind of hard to tell what's going on, like who is building what at like these companies, right? So
Yeah.
as long as they have like a decent like sales skill, like they're able to like raise money.
Yeah.
And I wonder, okay, so let's talk about like building a team. So like or like having the technical um moat, I would say. Like so basically one of the biggest challenge as like a VC doing diligence on these different innovations us, like I feel like there's like maybe two type of people. So like one's like a more sector dominant people who have like a lot of sector industry relationships and then
Mhm.
understanding the thing really clearly, and then there's another type of people who are more like on the index approach, like generalists, but like who has a great network. So I wonder, like, when you're approaching diligencing a particular company's technical moat, how would you go about it? And since like you have like coached like a, you know, thousands or hundreds of thousands of people who are like doing these like data science interviews, I wonder, is there like that much differences? Like, can you really tell from like the talents like quality or like I
So in hiring, you definitely can tell between uh basic, maybe intermediate, and a senior kind of data ML person. It's pretty easy. You just ask them open-ended questions and you go deeper and you go deeper and you go deeper and you try to see how many layers or levels they're able to dive into. And then the more intermediate and senior people will have stories where it's like, okay, this reminds me of something else I did at Uber. This reminds me of something I did at Meta. Oh, I've seen this problem solved at 3 other companies. Here's the general way it works. And then here's the general way it fails. And only years of experience are able to kind of have you generalize your answers versus someone else who's maybe more intermediate. It's like, here's how it solved the problem. And then a junior person's like, oh, is that even a problem? I didn't know such a problem existed. You know what I mean? So that's like what I mean by you're able to assess levels based on just how nuanced their answers are, how deeply they're able to talk about it, and like if they've seen this kind of pattern or problem happen in other companies and how they solved it. So you definitely are able to assess technical talent that way. Um, and then, of course, on your end, as an interviewee, which is my whole job of helping interviewees do better in interviews, I am able to coach people on like, hey, make sure to bring up relevant stories, like pre-plan the stories. Like if you're interviewing at Uber, it's a two-sided marketplace. You work at Craigslist, which is also a marketplace. Try to make parallels between marketplace dynamics so that when you interview at Uber, you can bring in stories from how you worked with a two-sided marketplace at Craigslist. You know what I mean? So that might seem obvious, but for a lot of interviewees, they forget to bring up those stories or they forget to make the parallels. And of course, as a hiring manager, you always love to hear that an employee has already, prospective employees already solved similar questions or problems at a different company successfully, but candidates just forget to bring up that story. So TLDR, you can definitely tell about technical talent. Now, moat is something else. And moat, I'm not a VC. In my eyes, I'm not sure how much moat is a real kind of barrier. I'll tell you, in the Gen AI space, obviously you need a lot of money to compute some of these large language models. And, that could be a moat. Like you just don't even have the compute or you just don't have the money to acquire the compute and do these big training runs. So you'll never get the performance. But thanks to open source models, which are actually really, really good. I can't really remember a time where open source stuff has been this good compared to its closed source variant. For example, like I have an iPhone, but there's no like other phone where it's like, oh, like branded by the community where it's just like even half as good. You know what I mean? Like there's no like third party phone. Um, you know what I mean? So same way Google, there's Bing, but there's no like, oh yeah, I just go on like the peoplesearch.com, which is run by random people. Yet for ML, you have these companies donating models. You have got Facebook donating Llama. You've got like Anthropic releasing Claude and different things like that. So I'm still not entirely sure like how important technical moat is. What I've just seen is like it's really about execution speed, and this if you execute early enough and you execute fast enough, you build, I wouldn't say a moat, but you just build a lead over someone else. It's not a moat, it's just that if that person had started earlier and worked as fast as you, they would be in the same spot. Um, yeah, these, ever since Peter Thiel was there talking about network effects and all that, everyone wants to claim that their business is a network effect, or like we have got some moat, or we got some like self reinforcing like feedback loops so that no one else can compete. I'm not sure I've really seen that come into play that often. Because something like even like Uber and Lyft, oh, what's Uber's moat? Like Lyft is right there, right? Trying to compete with Uber. Um, Airbnb is a great network, but it's still not like, oh, impenetrable, right? It's not like, man, It's like Verbo's there too. People complain about Airbnb all the time. Like, it's a good business, but moat is very hard to achieve. I mean, social networking is one small place where it's like, oh yeah, like they actually got a moat. Like, yeah, everyone is on Facebook, and like that's kind of crazy that that ever happened, right? But I don't know. In these kind of new field things, I don't know too many things have a moat. Let me give you another clear example of like how much of a moat does technical moat matter. Like, okay, let's pretend OpenAI has a big technical moat, okay, and that's what makes the product really good. If that was the case, then I wouldn't be jumping to Perplexity, or I wouldn't be jumping to Claude and Anthropic. I wouldn't be jumping to other places, and like I can switch so easily, just like I can switch between Uber and Lyft. So again, everyone used to claim like Uber has these network effects and everyone's going to be using only Uber, it's a winner takes all. But it's like I can switch between Uber and Lyft in a second. I can switch between these large language models really easily. So I mean, maybe a company has an advantage or an edge for a little bit of time, but like a real moats, I don't see them too often. I don't see too many moats.
Okay. So Mary asked, "What is moat?" So like, so it's more like moat. Like,
Yeah.
so basically, essentially, it's like your unfair advantage over everybody else in the industry.
Yeah.
Like how hard it is to for you to like beat your competitor, basically, or like, or your competitor to beat you. In
Yeah.
a way.
So like everyone's already logged into Facebook and has an account. So when Facebook launches Facebook Marketplace, it's really hard to come after them because we're already signed in, logged in, and they already know about everyone and where they live. So it's really easy to make a marketplace to buy and sell used goods on Facebook Marketplace. And I can't very easily create a new marketplace kind of company for my area because I'd have to re-sign up everyone on my site versus on like Anthropic, sorry, on like, Chat GPT versus Claude, it doesn't really matter. I can switch within a second and it's not gonna bother me. And that's kind
Mm.
of crazy, right? Versus like I can't switch to nixmarketplace.com because there's no one listing anything, there's no one selling anything, it's empty, no one's signed up. Versus for these LLMs, like I can just join the next guys who has a better one in a second and it's all fine.
So in terms of investing, I wonder like, okay, so there's like a bunch of people building like the application layer of things, and then there's people focusing on like the foundation like model in general. So like I wonder like if you're like betting on these two genre category, like which one would you say you would bet your money on?
I mean, this is why I'm not a VC because I'm gonna be taking smaller swings and more reliable swings. So we've, I've heard people say if we were to stop innovation on foundation models, right? And this is like the best it was ever gonna be. I think we would still have a lot of products that need to be built or could be built in the next few years without any improvements on foundational models. Okay. Because of how many things have been unlocked and how much opportunity there is on the application side to build on top of these models. So if I'm not a VC investor, if I'm just me trying to build my own business or my own startup, I'm definitely going on the application side because I'm like, hey, there's so much value still that needs to be captured. And sure, it might not be billion each, there might not be that many $1 billion ops available, but I think that there's easily millions of 10, maybe there's at least 1,000 $10 million businesses waiting to be made just as a wrapper around some of these foundational models um,
Mm.
that haven't been built and like literally could be built right now.
So like what's gonna be there like, not moat, but, like, you're saying, like, running a little bit faster than everybody, like, I guess, like, what would be the thing that you would, like, focus on today? And if there's any
Yeah,
like,
team.
yeah.
I don't believe in moats, so how I would do that is just like, hey, do you have a track record of shipping great products? Right? Does the founders do they have a product design or product development background? And are they technically sound? And then do they have some domain experience or some unfair advantage? So I'll give you an example of an unfair advantage that has nothing to do with technical moat. It'd be like, hey, I'm an influencer in the travel space and I'm going to make a tool for travel agents. Or you know what? I run the Association of Travel Agents, so I'm going to make this really simple kind of travel planning tool and deploy it to my team of 100,000 travel agents across the world. And then that's, a pretty easy business. And by the way, ChatGPT, they can already plan your travel and already say, hey, if I asked it, hey, tell me 3 days in Barcelona, 3 days in Madrid, or tell me what are some things to do, it can already spit these things out. And thanks to agents, you can start having it book stuff like, hey, can you book me the museums in Barcelona if I was to go for 3 days? Book me the, tickets. Like people are building that out already. So the things I would look for are not really technical unfair advantages. I would just say look for like a base level of like technical and product skill. And I would look for like distribution advantages. Like, hey, I know 10,000 travel agents, something like that.
Amazing. Okay, so I got a question about like, okay, so there's like two questions under this domain. So like you're saying like distribution is king, totally
Yeah.
agree. Well, like I planned it like on our last part of the interview will totally address like like everything that you did for your distribution because you're obviously very successful at like, marketing as well as like building a brand and in general. Um but before that, I wanted to ask you about like, okay, so what are some tools that like VCs can use to actually invest in like better talent or investing in better companies in general? Just because I feel like there's a lot of hype under that category of things. I wonder if that's like a real hype or like if it's a hype.
I don't know anything about that because I'm not a VC making investments, so I don't know anything about that. Yeah.
Let's say how easy it is to build like so like I've constantly hearing people building, let's say linking scraper or like I don't even know why like I guess like it's more of like, oh, okay, so if you leave like a tier one company and then like LinkedIn automatically send like a VC message be like, yo, like XYZ left OpenAI, like maybe chat with them. And like so I wonder like is that easy to build? And like, is that going to be a quote unquote moat? I know you hate the word moat, but like, I guess like help them run faster than the competition.
Yeah, someone could build that. I don't see that to be too tough. I definitely know companies that already do things like this. Maybe this is a good VC specific use case, but I definitely know in sales, if your key person leaves your company and joins another company, a lot of sales tools already tell you about that because now you have a chance to like resell to a person who already knows and likes your tool, but now has a fresh budget at a fresh company. And sales tools already do that.
Oh, what is it called? What is it called?
Um, Clearbit should have this feature. Zoom Info should have this feature. Like these are like the bread and butter like sales and intelligence tools that are used to like kind of figure out leads. Like that every salesperson, every BDR, every SDR is going to be using. So Clearbit, Zoom Info. Then there's some more AI specific companies that are trying to do something like this. I think there's like an YC, like a 5% company that's again doing something like this, looking at like company changes and allowing you to like build alerts on people who change their company and then as an opportunity to resell them on the products. But yeah, I mean, again, like there's 5 companies that do this already that I know of. And like, I'm not a sales or marketing person right now. So
Yo, I feel like this is like so interesting just because like literally in the I would say like one of the most popular thing I've heard in like the space is like, how are we gonna use AI to like improve your like deal sourcing ability? So
yeah,
essentially it's like yeah, mostly based off like XYZ left XYZ or XYZ change their data to stealth or like based on company incorporation or whatever,
yeah.
like these kind of like more traditional data on like telling if like the company's like a good company. I wonder like just like leveraging your data science uh skill set, like I wonder like what would be something that you would build if you're like investing in the category.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first rule of data science is data science and machine learning shouldn't be used everywhere on everything. And what you've described, Grace, like if in this exact example, I would just go ahead and cold email everybody who leaves OpenAI right when they leave and say, hey, congrats on the move away. If starting companies in your future, we do this, we do blah, blah, blah. And I'd send a cold email to everyone. Why use smart tactics and only email half the people when cold emails basically cost me nothing and I can cold email everybody? Because it's like the difference OpenAI, maybe there's only 100 people leaving a year. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
so if I was to build it, I would do exactly how you outlined it, which is, hey, listen, like let's go cold email everyone who leaves Anthropic, everyone who leaves OpenAI, and pitch them on our startup venture and just like do a quick like, hey, just curious to hear, we're really interested in the AI data space. You had a really cool background. um as you're doing next steps, if forming companies there, we'd love to chat because we bet early. And I'd send that to everybody. And I have the infrastructure is there to send cold emails to thousands of people. And again, same way you want to do Meta. Meta is a much bigger company, but again, still there might only be 5,000 engineers leaving Meta per year, maybe 10, maybe 10,000. That's still a small enough pool that I could go ahead and cold email everybody. So yeah, I wouldn't be smart with it. I would just like look at the top companies, see who's leaving and see what their LinkedIn profile says, or if their title is ML engineer, just go ahead and cold email everyone. I'd do that.
I would argue another thing, like, people could so I would argue, like, maybe some of the good people may not think about leaving. So, like, is there any, like, tools on that end to, like,
No,
identify
no,
their
because that's not a tool problem. How can I make you leave
yeah,
Meta and
okay.
600K? What tool? There's no tool for that. Like I pay you 600K or somehow you have a really good idea that makes you want to leave such a good salary, but otherwise there's no tool for that. That's like a people problem or human problem and not even a problem. Like, okay, it makes sense you don't want to leave. Okay, I get that.
You mentioned about, like, the infrastructure for, like, these cold email. Where are you talking about, like, Clearbit and Zoom Info, or, like, are you talking about something else?
So those are places to kind of get information about people and like where they work and their contact information. The infrastructure I just meant to say is like a vanilla Gmail account, you can maybe only send 200 emails a day, right? But
Mhm.
obviously, there's a bunch of tools out there that are used by, again, sales teams, sourcing companies, real estate folks where they send out not 200 emails per day, but 10,000 emails per day. So what I'm just basically trying to say is that technology is already there and people have already been sending cold emails to more than 10,000 people a day. Like any big recruiting firm, they're going to be sending thousands and thousands of emails per day. So all I'm trying to say is like, why try to prioritize who the right people are to contact when I can literally probably send an email to every ML engineer in America when they leave their job because there might only be 10,000 such cases in a year, maybe 20,000, 50,000. But like the pool of ML engineers is only maybe like 200,000 people in America. So it's
Mm,
pretty easy. Even if you didn't even quit your job, it's pretty easy to just go ahead and cold email all 200,000, which is like, hey, I didn't even see if you quit your job. But, if you are thinking about a change, or if you have some startup idea and you need some help, let us know. I could
mhm.
send that email to 200,000 people. And
Call it a day.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So, where would be the underlooked area that you would think, like, talents are hanging out? Besides, like, the usual
That,
suspect, like, if you're really good, you're probably at, like, a big company, like,
yeah.
what exactly would be, like, a underlooked market that's, like, people are actually working really, like, doing smart work, but, like, they are maybe terrible at job interviews? Maybe they need your help, but anyway, so I wonder, like, where would be the
You're
underlooked
saying
market?
where are there really good data scientists and
Yeah,
ML folks
yeah,
that are not at tier 1 companies? And like how could we find them better?
yeah,
So I've seen, I mean, this is see the problem with every answer I have is that other people also know these answers. So is it truly low value? So I'll give you an example like physics, like physics PhDs, right? If you're doing like astrophysics research, you can pretty much figure out machine learning stuff because astrophysics people are already working with like large data sets and doing coding and are really smart because physics people are smart in general. But again, Wall Street already knows this, which is why a lot of these funds go after physics PhDs. It's just like, hey, if you don't want to do physics anymore, come to Wall Street and pay you well. So I guess looking at hard sciences could be one place to find this pool of people. But again, for company formation, like for a VC's perspective, um, I would maybe look at young people. I still feel like people. I'll tell you this. I think that if you aren't super in the weeds of things, you get hung up on titles like, oh, they're not an ML engineer, they're a data scientist, or oh, they're just a software engineer. They can't be an ML engineer, but like you can kind of upskill into being an ML engineer from a software engineer like in 6 months and be productive. I bet you. Now, I don't think that person's going to make a foundational model, right? Or like they're going to like contribute to like the latest and greatest. But again, venture isn't about making new foundational models. It's about making successful businesses that use AI. And you don't have to be like a AI PhD or machine learning PhD to go build one of these businesses. There are stories of like, yeah, college seniors who are just studying computer science who can make some cool businesses. So I would say like, yeah, if someone's just a software engineer, I wouldn't hold it against them if they don't have, an ML PhD or like formal ML research experience. Like if they've hacked together some projects in the ML space and they have a good software foundation or a good computer science foundation, I'd be happy with that. I'd be
Mm.
totally okay with that, right? So if someone told me like, "Oh, I'm really good at cybersecurity and I'm a really good software engineer," I would be okay with that person running an ML company because they can figure it out. And if they're really that good at cybersecurity and like getting the weeds of things and understanding how devices work and looking for exploits, they're going to figure out ML stuff too, understand how it works and look for exploits or look for performance improvements, just like the way they do for cybersecurity stuff. Like I wouldn't hold it against them.
Okay, I want to throw in a data. Like yesterday, I read. Let me just like quickly pull out like what did I read yesterday? So basically, okay, so yesterday, Snowflake acquired a company. Like the company's name is like blinking in my mind. So basically, essentially, I think in the past, like data, Mosaic ML was like acquired for I guess like $21 million per employee, based on the acquiring rate divided by like the number of employee.
Mm-hmm.
And this other company was acquired for I guess like 40 something million per employee.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like mind blown based on how much money people would pay for like a machine learning engineer
Yeah.
or like AI engineer in general. So I wonder like why they're so expensive. And then as you mentioned, like it sounds like they're like not that hard to find or like anyone is like just basically like under some sort of like training, they could just pick up the speed really fast. I wonder like why are they so conflicted? Like, why are
Well,
some
those
people
are obviously really, really good ML folks. And again, we're talking about like sourcing for venture.
yeah.
In sourcing for venture, I have a bias to give more people a shot because I am taking a portfolio of bets. So I'm not going to be like, oh, you're a dropout from college, because that might be Mark Zuckerberg. You know what I mean? Or, oh, you're a dropout from CS. What do you know about ML? Because that might be Bill Gates. You know what I mean? So that's why I'm saying like it is easy to pick up those skills from a venture context, but it makes sense for a company like Snowflake if they can find 30 people who work well together who are really good at ML AI and they're run by someone who has lots of experience. It makes sense for them to pay a bunch of money for it. I think. So I'm not. I know it's hard to. My answer was more about like for venture sourcing of like if I saw a 21-year-old who was a really good software engineer who didn't
Mm.
have ML experience say that they want to make a Gen AI application company, I'd be like, all right, go for it. I just think that Snowflake isn't looking for people to make, Gen AI applications. They're trying to, do something more intense. And for that, you might need better talent. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, I don't know. I don't know why they're doing it, and I don't know if that's like a great thing, if that makes sense. I worked at Nest, which got acquired by Google. Nest, the smart thermostat, they were acquired for $3 billion. It was, I think, at that time, the largest acquisition ever made by Google. I think that before it was DoubleClick. That was the second biggest. So I worked at the company that was the biggest acquisition by Google. I think they got acquired in 2016. Um, Maybe 2015, but I think 2016. Anyways, I mean, most acquisitions fail, right? So no one would be like 10 years later, like, wow, you guys got acquired for X per employee. Look at that. Like, like it's about building good businesses and like acquisition, and by the way, these probably are talent acquisitions, right? Like they're not, you know what I mean? Like we don't know, are they being acquired because shit, they're bringing so much revenue with only 20 people, or are they being
Mhm.
acquired because hey, these are all smart people?
Mm.
If it's just a bunch of smart people getting acquired, that's an acqui-hire. That's
Mm.
not that much of a win. Sure, it's like a bigger acqui-hire, but it's not a big win. Same way,
Mhm.
I think a lot of these self-driving companies, about 4 or 5 years ago, that was all the rage, and it would be a story like, "Oh, 10 million per engineer." You know, Uber's acquiring a self-driving company where there's only 10 people working there, but it got acquired for 100 million. You know, it's like, wow, that's awesome. But like, is that why we're acquiring self-driving companies and teams? No, it's to like build self-driving cars. And like, do we have one yet? No. What happened to Uber's self-driving program? Oh, it doesn't really. I don't think it exists anymore. It's really just Waymo and Cruise and a few others. But anyways, the point is, Snowflake acquiring someone for a lot of money is okay, but doesn't really tell me anything, because if you are trying to make a venture-backed business, like I don't think that's being acqui-hired is not like the thing we should be excited about or like the end goal, nor should that be anything that informs your strategy, I feel. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was just asking, like, how hard it is to train the ML engineers or,
Mhm.
like, because I feel like I would bet on, like, so, like, I invested in a company, so essentially they're training, like, the raw, talent from, like, the African market and Southeast Asia. Yeah, Southeast Asia. So, essentially, they're training a lot of engineer in those markets because they identify, like, the raw talent there is, like, amazing, and, with, basically, let's say, you call it, like, 6 month of training earlier, so let's call it, like, a 6 month of training. They're,
Yeah.
like, they're doing pretty amazing. So I wonder, like, how hard it is to, like, because I feel like a lot of the startups that they're built, I think a company is as good as, like, their talent, right? And
Mhm.
then if their talent is, like, should we bet on, like, the people who are, like, already super mature, like, who already work at the same company, or we just bet on, like, the people who are, generally pretty smart, they can, like, figure out, like, how to ML, not how to ML, but, like, how to, like, just, like, the newest technology, basically.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's levels to the game. Like, I don't know. I don't know. What's your background, Grace, before all of this? Um,
My background is, like, communication.
Communications, right? Yeah. I don't do communications, but I guess I did a little bit of PR. I wrote a book. I write a little bit. There is definitely a big difference between really good writers and bad writers, but there's just so many good writers out there. If you go to a bookstore and you showed me like 50 different novels, I don't know if I would be able to pick out like, oh, this novel is so much better than someone else's novel. For example, I don't know if what was
Okay,
that vampire movie?
let
So
me, like,
basically, I don't know how to judge talent in communications, and probably I don't know if there's 10x or 1000x communications people, but there are for engineers, and there's like levels to the game in engineering. So that explains kind of why, like, yes, you can train someone in 6 months to be doing some basic ML work or make ML applications, but there's also like people doing PhDs where they need that work done. And I'm not sure how many jobs need a PhD in communications, for example, unless you're a professor. But like in the real world, I don't know if having a PhD in communications really makes you 10x better at like corporate communications or like a 10x news anchor. You know what I mean? But
yeah.
in engineering, it's pretty easy to see like, oh yeah, if you have a PhD versus someone who just finished high school, like, or someone who just finished undergrad, you can tell the difference. Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about, I would say, like, let's talk about, like, building an audience. Oh, well, like, before that, I wanted to quickly chat about, like, your strengths, which is, like, interviewing and everything. So can you give us, like, a quick, I think there's a couple things about interviewing is, like, really important. One is, like, the mindset, and then the second one is, like, the approach. I know that your approach is to cold email some people or, like, doing side projects that are, like, making you stand out. Can you kind of, like, give us, like, 3 tips on interviewing? And one of the biggest thing I feel like a lot of the talents that are, I don't know if it's, like, just, like, women, this is like a woman thing, or like a lot of people just don't feel like, like, they're qualified even when they're, like, overqualified to a degree. Like, I feel like a lot of these jobs, especially in the non-technical world, it doesn't really require you, like you said, like the communication majors, like, you can't really, a lot of it's like, just can you get the stuff done, right? Like, and I feel like a lot of people are not very good at, like, showcasing during the interview, and also, like, getting the interview in the first place in these, like, super competitive areas. Like, how would you kind of, like, advise people in general?
Yeah. So, two things. I know a lot about interviewing. which is a different skill than getting the interview, right? So those are two different skills. So in terms of getting the interview, it's about sending cold emails and building projects that showcase your skill. Um, if you're in communications, you write a bunch, or you show that you've got a book, right? Like, I don't, I'll see a job or something. It's like, oh, you need strong oral communication. I'll say, oh, well, I've got a best-selling book. Like, I'm not a communications major. I don't have anything like that. I'm not an English
Yeah.
person. But like, hey, let that stand for itself. And that's the kind of attitude I tell people to have. Hey, you know about machine learning. Where's your machine learning project? Where are your GitHub contributions? Where's your GitHub profile? Are you a contributor to Spark? Um, have you made a bunch of tutorials around how to use PyTorch? If you have, link to your YouTube channel. Because again, I don't know if you're really good at PyTorch, and I don't know if you're very good at communication. But if you say, oh, I have a YouTube channel with 30,000 subscribers where I teach people how to do machine learning with PyTorch, or I wrote the best-selling book, Hands-on Machine Learning with PyTorch, well, I'm going to assume you've got these PyTorch skills. Now, obviously, that's at the extreme end. Like, you're not telling people to go write a book. But like, if you even put out some tutorials, like just on your own personal blog, or if you built a little self-driving RC car, that at least tells me, oh, you know something about computer vision. Oh, you know something about ML because you made a little RC car drive on its own. And that requires some basic skills. And that's something that's really easy to prove. If you have a video of you with your little car and your car starts driving around in your little basement without hitting obstacles, great. You've shown me that you've built something. And people just don't do that. So that's my tip on showcasing skills and getting those interviews. For the interview itself, I'm going to keep it general, not really talk about the interviews. Being excited about the role is something that people mess up because people are interviewing at 10 different companies at the same time. Still interview at 10 same companies, but like do research on each company, see who's interviewing you, have a few good poignant questions that are way better than just what are the hours like, or how do you like working here? Have some start question like, oh, what's your guys' approach to like how much, like ask pointed technical questions, right? If you're an engineer, ask them something relevant. Don't just ask them, how do you like working here? So that's kind of on the interviewing side is something I can tell people to do. That's non-technical. Now, technical wise that's the whole point of the book and data lemurs for the technical skills.
Yeah, read the book, people. But anyway, so I got a question for you. So
Yeah.
let's say you mentioned like, okay, interview at 10 different places, but also be like very specific. I guess like how would you run your time? Let's say you have like 3 months to get a job at XYZ place.
Yeah.
I'm like, how would you spend the time to like cold emailing people? And like what would you be like cold emailing? Or like
So
would you approach this position that's like open already? Or would you approach something that's like not open yet, but you want to be like BFF with like the team at the beginning before like they want to do
um
the thing.
I would build projects in the space that I'm trying to work in. So let's say I really want to work in self-driving cars. I'm not gonna be like, oh, I can't build a self-driving car. I'm gonna make a small little RC car, build it, put it on YouTube, talk about how I built it, and use some of the same computer vision techniques that self-driving car companies are using and brush that up on that and like try to make contributions to that are open source or like put up projects. That's what I would spend my first 1 month doing so that I have something to actually talk to people about. Because again, in tech, like, yeah, you can become buddies, but like, bro, if you don't know computer vision, how are you gonna work at a self-driving car company? It's not that helpful to be friends with people. So you do your first month there, and then your second month, you just cold email all the hiring managers, recruiters, people, tell them about how you're passionate, tell them about the self-driving car, try to go to a meetup, things like that. And then the last month, hopefully you have an interview or two, and you just grind on the interview prep to learn about ML system design, computer vision, Python, your leak code skills, data structure and algorithms, all the things you'd expect. Just grind on that. So that's how I'd go about it if I had to get, a job in the self-driving car industry in the next 3 months.
So in terms of grinding the interview prep, let's say if you're like in a non-technical position, I don't see a lot of like really, really good interview in specific subjects. Let's say if you're like a AE working at like a mid-market or whatever. Like so like there's like a lot of interview about PM, data science, engineering, but like the non-technical people job, it's like tend to doesn't really get a lot of attention on like the interview prep. So besides
Yeah.
like the general stuff that you'll be listening to, on
Yeah, I
the
don't
road.
know. I don't know much about it. I haven't really worked those roles. And as I mentioned, I think it goes back to like it's just really hard to see who's a 10x salesperson versus someone else. So you just hire people and you're quick to fire people and you can just ask them like, hey, what was your quota? And like, did you go over quota? And like, how much did you beat quota? And that's really all you can really do for like salespeople. But yeah, I don't, and they're, yeah.
So how many interview do you have to do at the same, like would you apply like 10 job at the same time, or like would you apply 2,000 job and then like wait for someone to like get back to you? I guess like what would
As
the
many as
number
I could, but if I was really dead set on self-driving, I would definitely find a list like top self-driving car companies. There might be 30, 40 of them in America and or that are in self-driving or like close to it, like they're building lidar systems or doing robotics or whatever. And I would definitely try to just go through all 40, apply to any open jobs, and then even if things weren't open, but I knew the right person being like director of machine learning, director of data science, I would also try to shoot them all a LinkedIn DM. That might only be like 300 people, which is easy to be done in a month because there's only, 3, 4 relevant people per company. And there's only 40, 50 self-driving car companies in the space and computer vision companies. So yeah, it's like max maybe 150 people to reach out to, maybe 200.
So how would you define like why would you go after like let's say like a self-driving, right? So like I would say like I feel like even like as an investor, it's really hard to figure out your niche because essentially
Mm.
people's like when people are like job hunting, I feel like it's kind of really similar. It's like, okay, so like there's like 5 genre category I'm like really passionate about, and there's like a 6,000 company in those space. And should I be like look at who is hiring aggressively first, or like should I
Mm,
be
there's riches and niches, right?
yeah.
So if you're a generalist investor, you might have trouble breaking into some industries. And same way, if you're just a generalist engineer, it is hard to say like, well, why should someone hire you then if you're just, hey, I'm an engineer, I know how to code. You're coding
Yeah.
the whole. So I
So
would force some niching. And obviously no one comes in as a blank slate because I already have, I'm not cold emailing crypto companies because I have nothing to do with crypto or finance. I already have this data background. That's why I gave you the example of self-driving. And same way you, Grace, you have this communications background, you've got this podcast. Maybe you go reach out to the 1,000 top communications firms or the 1,000 best media firms or media relation firms, but you wouldn't go after self-driving car companies because there's no fit. Just like I wouldn't go try to cold email to be, I don't know, PR companies or media firms. Like, I don't have
I think
projects.
you will do great in PR firms, by the way. On a side note.
Yeah. Yeah. Riches and niches. Yeah. It's tough. It's tough. I know you keep trying to bring the analogies to VC, but man, VC is such a generalist thing. And it's like, it makes sense that you're interested in 8 things, which is why it's so hard. Yeah. I don't know.
Um, I wonder, okay, so if someone's niche is to like like basically recruit the best like data scientists or something at their firm, would you see like what would you start like see as like a challenges, or kind of like the strengths is very obvious, like obviously your niche is like to help your portfolio company to become best at data. But what necessarily like do you think like that's actually a strength? Like for example, help people recruit. Do you think that's like a kind of like a actually big plus for startups, or
I
do you feel like it's no?
I didn't quite understand the question. You're saying if I worked at a company
So
or
let's
if
say if you start like the Nick like Nick Capital or something. So
yeah,
like and then your capital is like core like because a lot of the VC's bro is to like help portfolio company to recruit the best talent.
okay.
And your like niche obviously is data.
Yeah.
So I'm not like I'm just saying this like as a random example about like
Yeah.
adding value things that VCs
Yeah.
do. So like I wonder what exactly do you feel like that's actually going to help the startups, or do you feel like that's a kind of like a fake thing that, like, it doesn't really
Um,
make sense for?
maybe it could work. It's probably not my spot to say just because I don't run a VC firm and I don't know those dynamics. I do think a VC firm run by a celebrity in a data or software space could do well. And I know there are some firms like that where it's like, oh, we are, and they'll pick a nerdy name for their venture fund and they'll be like, oh, we're run by three really top machine learning people and we like invest in machine learning companies. And those three people are already well known in machine learning. I've seen that work okay. Again, I don't even know if it works okay because I don't know their
Like,
returns. And
yeah,
like
no one
everyone
knows the
comes on
return until
their
like
chest.
10 years.
Most VCs aren't even doing that good. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, most of them aren't doing that good. That's why we're in a very tough business. Like, so I don't even know if that strategy works. Um, but at least they're able to get some deal flow that way because they're already well known. But I'm not sure if the angle of like, I'll help you hire better would be strong enough. But I think if I could help you hire better and give you some guidance and give you some kind of
Cloud.
clout that, hey, I'm really good at ML and I like vouch for this team and what they're doing, that could work well. Yeah, I think that could work.
Okay. Let's talk about the last topic, which is cloud. You are amazing at building a brand.
Yeah.
Tell us about, like, let's say, like, the three tips on like a, technical people, or like a very niche, like, domain expertise person. How should they kind of build a brand online?
Yeah. So, big mistake I see is people aren't writing for their audience. They're writing for themselves and their career goals. For example, I could write about Gen AI strategy because I want to look cool and like Gen AI is hot, but I don't do Gen AI strategy. I run a startup that helps people get hired in the data space. So I'm not going to put out content like that just because everyone else is putting out Gen AI content. And same way that word strategy, people talk about strategy to kind of elevate their own brand. Like, oh, I'm a leader in this space. If I talk about high level topics, I'll be seen as a leader. And like people can kind of see through that. So I don't talk about strategy. I just help people get hired. And that's why people follow me because you have a problem. You want to like get better jobs in data and ML, and I'll go fix that problem. And I know that sounds so obvious, but 98% of people are getting this wrong. And I see it over and over again. I'm not going to call it people. Actually, I'm going to call it 98% of people. The content is for them, right? For example, I've heard people say, "Ew, I'll write a book so that I can establish myself as an authority in the space." That's exactly like you doing something for yourself rather than saying, "Oh, I want to write a book because I want to help my readers do X. And I'm going to put everything in the book that helps them achieve X goal. And I'm going to cut out everything else that doesn't help them achieve goal." So 99% of books are probably written not to help the reader, but they're written primarily first. Oh, if I do this, I'll have more clout. I'll get to go on TV. I'll get more speaking gigs. I'll get more lead flow from my agency. I will be able to do better VC investing because I'll be an authority. So these are all wrong motivations. And then if you have wrong motivations, you get bad content and bad products. So I think like 95% of books suck, 90% of content sucks for this self-serving reason. Um, yeah, yeah. When I see it for like creators, and I don't mean like Netflix is clearly not there to inflate Netflix's brand. Like their whole business is like create compelling content, which is why it's fun to watch Netflix because it's optimized for that. But when it comes to a book, or like J.K. Rowling's just optimized to entertain you. She's not trying to show off, I'm J.K. Rowling, come hire my content agency. But if you read a lot of books in technical space or business space, it'll be like, hey, I'm so and so, please pay me extra for one-on-one coaching, or please hire my agency to do your own marketing strategy. And it just doesn't work that well, and it corrupts the content. So that's probably my biggest tip I have. Is just be authentic, figure out what are people struggling with, and go help them do that. And of course, at the end, you can always be like, "P.S." Put an upsell or do something like that. But just the amount of books written for the author's ego or the author's brand is very, very high. Yeah.
Totally. Okay. So in the end, I want to give the audience a shout out of your book and then your company. Let's spend like a minute talking about your
Yeah.
company.
Yeah, so I run datalemur.com, a free way to practice for SQL and Python interviews. Again, beloved by data scientists, data engineers, and ML folks. We've got over 150,000 users who are just practicing questions online for free. There's, of course, a paid option if you want to unlock more practice. But even if you don't unlock it, which 98% of people don't do, it's a really compelling tool to kind of just up your technical skills in a free, fun way directly in the browser. You don't need to install anything, do anything. Yeah, and it's like just less friction. And I just try to help people. And everything's written really casually. Most tutorials and like learning resources are really formal. LinkedIn has like brand guidelines. You can't curse. Well, I curse in my stuff, and I put jokes and I put memes, and we just trying to make learning SQL and Python more enjoyable and like help you get better interviews. So yeah.
Okay, so 1 minute fire round. What's your favorite book?
Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb.
Not this one. I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
yeah, I guess this is second book. Yeah.
uh, who would you invite to your dinner party?
Um, I'm a big Drake fan. He's in trouble right now a little bit, and he's beefing with Kendrick Lamar, but I just like his music. It would be fun. It would be cool. It would be cool.
Who made the biggest impact in your career?
Um, I can't pick one person, but I think my last boss at Safegraph, or sorry, the CEO of Safegraph, Oren Hoffman, he had a very big impact on me. That was the first time I was working at a startup, and I sat right next to him, and he taught me a lot of things, and I just like learned a lot just watching him operate and execute. And he'd sold his last company, LiveRamp, for a lot of money, so he knew what he was doing. And at Safegraph, he like ran things with a lot of experience, so I was able to kind of pick up on a lot of things on how do we run a company and how do we do things just from watching him execute because he sat right next to me.
Amazing. Where can we find you outside of work?
Like for fun, or you mean on like media?
Everything.
You'll find me on the pickleball court. You'll find me visiting New York, and you'll find me on the beach. I love the beach. I've been to like the beaches in like 20 countries. I just like snorkeling and drinking by the beach and looking at animals through snorkeling and scuba as well. So yeah.
So, what would you be drinking though?
Um, Pina colada, some alcoholic drink, beer, something fun. Yeah, but actually the more fun part of the beach is like I've been able to go to a lot of cool barrier reefs. I went to the Great Barrier Reef off of Australia earlier this year, and that was like phenomenal. And I've been able to see some other really cool coral reefs all around the world, and just so fun to see kind of sea turtles and fish and jellyfish. I saw sharks. Yeah, and just kind of be right there with them.
Be right there with the sharks. But
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah, yeah. I mean,
that's a great way to end. Okay, give us all your social handles before we.
yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn. I've got about 165,000 followers at Nick Singh. I also post on Twitter, about 30,000 followers there. And those are the two primary ones. And I also like send out emails. You'll find that on nicksing.com. I send out emails about data and career stuff. So yeah, those are the three best places to go.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Nick, for coming on the show today.
Cool. Thanks for having me, Grace. This was a lot of fun.
Okay, let me and